Ahoj a vítaj pri novom podcaste, ja som Andrea, lektorka anglického jazyka a tak ako vždy aj dnes si budeme čítať knižku Robinson Crusoe. Konkrétne ideme na 6. kapitolu a dneska aj 7. kapitolu, takže zistíme, či náhodou niekoho stretol na tom ostrove, prípadne stretol niekoho iného, či utiekol, pretože v minulej časti sme zistili, že na ostrove bolo niekoľko desiatok rokov. Ak si ešte nepočul predošlé kapitoly, utekaj na náš blog www.chcemsaučiť.sk, kde nájdeš úplne všetky predošlé kapitoly, taktiež aj predošlú knihu v nižšom leveli, toto je level 2, tak choď sa vzdelávať, choď čítať a keď chceš čítať spolu so mnou, otvor si ma na YouTube, kde si zapneš automatické titulky a tým pádom aj vidíš presne to isté, čo ja čítam. Ak sa chceš učiť novú slovnú zásobu, choď taktiež na náš blog, kde máš pekne vypísané slovíčka v angličtine, potom výslovnosť a slovenský preklad. Takže takýmto spôsobom si vieš prečítať tie slovíčka ešte predtým, než si začneme spoločne čítať, aby si mal alebo mala možnosť lepšie porozumieť danému textu. Ale tu už by veľa takých nových slovíčok nemalo byť, takže ak poznáš tie predošlé, nemala by si mať problém. Poďme teda na to. Chapter 6. A Footprint. Then, one year, something strange and terrible happened. I often walked along the shore, and one day I saw something in the sand. I went over to look at it more carefully and stopped in a sudden surprise. It was a footprint. The footprint of a man. Who could this be? Afraid, I looked around me. I listened. I waited. Nothing. I was more and more afraid. Perhaps this man was one of those wild people who killed and ate other men. I looked everywhere, but there was nobody and no other footprint. I turned and hurried home. There's someone on my island, I said to myself. Perhaps he knows about me. Perhaps he's watching me now from behind the tree. Perhaps he wants to kill me. That night I couldn't sleep. The next day I got all my guns ready and I put more wood and young trees around my house. Nobody could see me now. But after 15 years alone on the island, I was afraid and I did not leave my cave for 3 days. In the end, I had to go out to milk my goats. But for 2 years I was afraid. I stayed near my house and I never used my guns because I didn't want to make a noise. I could not forget the footprint, but I saw and heard nothing more, and slowly I began to feel happier. One day, a year later, I was over on the west side of the island. From there, I could see the other islands, and I could also see a boat far out to sea. If you have a boat, I thought, it's easy to sail across to this island. Perhaps this explained the footprint. It was a visitor from one of the other islands. I began to move more freely around the island again and built myself a third house. It was a very secret place in a cave. No wild man will ever find that, I said to myself. Then one year something happened which I can never forget. I was again on the west side of the island and I was walking along the shore. Suddenly, I saw something which made me feel ill. There were heads, arms, feet, and other pieces of men's bodies everywhere. For a minute, I couldn't think, and then I understood. Sometimes there were fights between the wild men on the other island. Then they came here to my island with their prisoners to kill them, cook them, and eat them. Slowly, I went home, but I was angry. How could this man do this? For many months, I watched carefully for the smoke from fires, and I didn't see anything. Somehow, the wild men came and went, and I never saw them. I was angry and afraid. I wanted to shoot them all, but there were many of them and only one of me. Perhaps I can shoot 2 or 3, I said to myself, but then they will kill me and eat me. Then, one morning, in my 23rd year on the island, I was out in my fields and I saw the smoke from a fire. Quickly, I went up the hill to watch. There were 9 men around the fire, and they were cooking their terrible food. Then these wild men danced around the fire, singing and shouting. This went on for about 2 hours, and then they got into their boats and sailed away. I went down to the shore and saw the blood of the dead men on the sand. The next time they come, I'm going to kill them, I said angrily. Chapter 7. Man Friday. For 2 years, I never went anywhere without my gun. I felt lonely and afraid, and I had many sleepless nights. One night, there was a very bad storm, and I thought I heard the sound of guns out at sea. The next morning, I looked out and I saw a ship. It was lying on its side not far from the shore. Quickly, I put my little boat in the water and sailed out to it. There were 2 dead men on the ship, but no one alive. The bodies of the other sailors were lost in the sea. I took some clothes and tools, and also a box of Spanish gold and silver money. I was a rich man now, but what use was money to me? I could not buy anything with it. I wanted people, a friend, somebody to talk to, somebody who could help me escape from my island. One morning, I woke up and made a plan. I'll try to catch one of the prisoners of the wild man, I said to myself. He'll be happy to be alive, and perhaps he'll help me to escape. I watched day and night, but for a year and a half, there were no boats. Then one day, 5 boats came. There were about 30 men, and they had 2 prisoners. They made their fire on the sand and danced around it. Then they killed one of the prisoners and began to cook their terrible meal. The second prisoner waited under the trees, with 2 men to watch him. Suddenly, the prisoner turned and ran. The 2 men ran after him, but the other wild men were busy round the fire and did not see what was happening. The prisoner ran like a wild goat, and soon I saw that he was coming near the bottom of my hill. As fast as I could, I ran down the hill and jumped out of the trees between the prisoner and the 2 wild men. I hit the first man with the wooden end of my gun, and he fell down, but I had to shoot the second man. The poor prisoner did not move. He was afraid of the noise of my gun. I called to him and tried to show him that I was friendly. Slowly, he moved nearer to me, but just then the first wild man began to get up from the ground. Then the prisoner spoke and understood that he wanted my sword. How happy I was to hear words again! I gave him my sword, and at once he cut off the head of the enemy. Hurriedly, we hid the dead bodies under the leaves, and then left quickly. I took my prisoner to my secret cave on the other side of the island and gave him food and drink. After that, he went to sleep. He was a fine young man, about 25 years old, tall and well-built, with a kind face and a nice smile. He had brown skin, black hair, bright eyes, and strong white teeth. I decided to give him the name of Man Friday because I first saw him on a Friday. When he woke up in the morning, he ran out to me. I was milking the goats in the field, and he got down on the ground and put his head near my foot. I understood that he was thanking me, and I tried to show him that I was his friend. I began to teach him to speak English, and soon he could say his name, master, and yes and no. How good it was to hear a man's voice again. Later that day, we went back to my first house. We went carefully along the beach, but there were no boats and no wild men, just blood and bones over the sand. I felt ill, but Friday wanted to eat the pieces of men's bodies which were still on the ground. I showed him that this was terrible for me, and he understood. When we got to my house, I gave man Friday some trousers and I made him a coat and a hat. He liked his new clothes very much. Then I made him a little tent to sleep in, but for a few weeks I always took my gun to bed with me. Perhaps Friday was still a wild man and would try to kill me in the night. At first, Friday was very afraid of my gun. Sometimes he talked to it and asked it not to kill him. Friday was a quick learner and his English got better day by day. He helped me with the goats and with the work in the cornfield, and soon we were good friends. I enjoyed teaching him and most of all, having a friend to talk to. This was the happiest of all my years on the island. Friday and I lived together happily for 3 years. I told him the story of my adventures and about life in England, and he told me about his country and his people. One day we were at the top of the highest hill on the island, and we were looking out to sea. It was very clear that day, and we could see a long way. Suddenly, Friday began to jump up and down, very excited. "What's the matter?" I said. "Look, master, look!" Friday cried. "I can see my country. Look over there!" I looked, and there to the northwest, between the sea and the sky, was a long thin piece of land. I learned later that it was the island of Trinidad, and that my island was in the mouth of the river Orinoco on the north coast of South America. I began to think again about escape. Perhaps Friday wanted to go home too. Perhaps together we could get to his country. But what then? Would Friday still be my friend, and would his people kill me and eat me? I took Friday to the other side of the island and showed him my big canoe. It still lay under the trees. It was very old now, and there were holes in the wood. "Could a boat like this sail to your country, Friday?" I asked him. "Oh yes," he answered. "A boat like this can carry a lot of food and drink." "Then we'll make another canoe like this and you can go home in it," I said. But Friday looked very unhappy. "Why are you angry with me?" he asked. "What have I done? Why do you want to send me home?" "But I thought you wanted to go home," I said. "Yes, but you must come with me. Kill me if you want, but don't send me away from you." Then I saw that Friday was a true friend, and so I agreed to go with him. We began to work on the canoe at once. Friday chose the tree himself. He understood wood better than I did, and we cut it down. We worked hard, and in a month the boat was finished. 2 weeks later, it was in the sea, and we began to get ready for our long journey. The end. Ďalšiu časť máme za sebou. Táto bola napínavá, keďže tam išlo o jedine ľudí a Robinson má kamoša. No a na ďalší krát budeme počúvať už poslednú časť, takže pripravte sa na to a na Instagrame určite počas ďalšieho týždňa sa budem pýtať, ktorú knižku chcete čítať ďalej. Pôjdeme na level 3, takže určite to sledujte na chcemsaučiť.sk a verím, že si spoločne vyberieme niečo zaujímavé. Ak sa ti tento podcast páčil, určite mi daj like na YouTube, alebo mi môžeš nechať hodnotenie na Spotify, to vždy pomáha, pretože týmto spôsobom sa tieto videá alebo audio ukazuje viacerým ľuďom a tým pádom viacerí to môžu počúvať a učiť sa. Tak počujeme sa na budúce, teším sa na to a nezabudni pozerať Instagram na chcemsaučiť.sk, aby si mal možnosť vybrať ďalšiu knižku. Počujeme sa, bye bye!